20th of January, UN forces consolidate positions below Seoul against diminishing Red pressure. All along the front, there is a noticeable lack of the usual heavy communist troop concentrations. Belief is expressed that they have retired to regroup their armies, badly mauled in recent weeks by air and artillery strikes. On the 25th of January, after several days of aggressive probing attacks, the UN units below Seoul begin a limited offensive. Homicidal, not geographical, is the intent. By week's end, one UN task force slashes to within 10 miles of Seoul. In the central front, Wonju has been retaken, and Allied soldiers scour the mountains, exacting losses of 10-1 on the enemy. On the 10th of February, the 1st Corps of the 8th Army crosses the Han River as the Reds pull back to Seoul. The 25th Division comes to a halt at the south gates of the city. Kimpo Airfield is recaptured, and the fort of Incheon is occupied without the loss of a man. On the central front, the 10th Corps continues its action against stiffening enemy resistance. In less than 3 weeks, the Allies' limited offensive has killed and wounded an estimated 73,000 Chinese. On the 11th of February, the Chinese launch their expected counteroffensive on a 30-mile front in the central mountains. Their troops vainly attempt to drive a wedge through the center of the 8th Army's lines. Armored counterattacks smash north from Wonju, and air and artillery increase their hour-by-hour pounding. Finally, north of Incheon, Allied troops cave in the west flank of the Red Drive. By the 18th of February, the Reds' drive has been spent and broken. UN forces have inflicted 33,000 more casualties on the Chinese. On the 20th of February, the Reds have fallen back along most of the 70-mile front. Their total losses for the month rise to approximately 100,000, while UN forces prepare still another killer offensive in their war of maneuver. During the week of the 22nd to the 29th of January, the United Nations limited offensive moves northward as strong task forces recapture key cities and probe for the enemy's main line of defense. Here, a 25th Division combat team strikes north from positions below Osan to test communist strength and to occupy the many towns reported held by only token enemy units. Troops of the 35th Regimental Combat Team enter battered Osan without opposition. After defense posts are established, they push on toward the first day's objective, a village north of Osan. Here, a soldier cleans and checks his machine gun to avoid the danger of stoppages in the wintry weather. Across a frozen stream, the men continue their advance along the road to Suwon. Other UN units to the east move 12 miles above Wonju, while Kumyang-jang falls to Allied forces in an attack highlighted by a bayonet charge of the Turkish brigade. Naval units bombard Incheon in a diversionary raid. UN planes fly 700 sorties on this day, inflicting high losses against the enemy. Though tanks have not recently been encountered in any large numbers, the troops are well prepared for them. As the task force nears its day's objective, civilians coming from the village are methodically searched for weapons. The refugee problem has eased considerably in comparison with the mass flight of hundreds of thousands from Seoul and other endangered cities in the past month, but there are still those who remain in the combat zones between the two armies, keeping UN soldiers constantly on guard against the danger of communist infiltrators. Task force troops move carefully into the war-scarred town, where they will spend the night, on the alert for Red snipers and suicide groups. A South Korean interpreter questions 2 refugees. As the limited offensive goes into its second day, the 25th Division spearhead sweeps across the low hills towards Suwon. The 8th Army, finding little Red pressure to contend with, regains hundreds of square miles in the western sector of the front. An enemy strong point is encountered, and artillery is called for. The 155 howitzer is zeroed in. To avoid bypassing red pockets in the hills, the troops leave the roads, searching the countryside and villages. Prisoners are taken, some of the few found in the nearly deserted towns. On the second day of their thrust up the main coastal road to Seoul, the task force enters the outskirts of Suwon, carefully searching every building for concealed Reds. Scattered enemy resistance is quickly cleaned out. Meanwhile, sizable gains are recorded north of Icheon and Kumyangjeong, while the naval shelling of Incheon moves into its second day. The day after Suwon's capture, an armored spearhead leaves the north gate, pushing on towards the Han River. Soon it meets the first strong Red defensive lines, halting 12 miles from Seoul. General Joseph S. Bradley, Assistant Commander of the 25th Division, inspects his advancing troops. The customary inspection and interrogation of civilians begins at Suwon. Men of the 25th Division rest as reports come in that firm contact has finally been reestablished with major units of the enemy. UN troops, in the second week of their limited offensive, battle northward toward Seoul, continuing to forge ahead over the bitterly contested ground north of Suwon. In the new system of United Nations offense, forced by communist hold or die tactics, Allied forces leave the roads and dig the Reds from their caves and foxholes. Enemy dead litter the ridge. Chinese prisoners, routed out of the hills, are thoroughly searched and administered first aid by soldiers of the 25th Division. The face of an American GI expresses the bitter sadness that comes with war. The captives are then escorted to the rear for further interrogation. Very few Chinese surrender to UN forces, as they are taught to expect swift execution upon capture. When convinced that they will not be killed, they are often eager to give information. A United Nations task force moves up for an assault on an enemy-held ridge north of Suwon, as the offensive pushes steadily ahead. Realizing the dangers of over-fatigue, these hardened soldiers have learned to take advantage of every opportunity to rest. Now, well accustomed to the strenuous conditions of battle, the men group together in a well-earned sleep. General Bradley consults with the company commander of the Spearhead Unit, which will attack the communist strongpoint lying across the main road to Seoul. Tank commanders determine Red positions and ready their crews for firing. The attack gets underway with the usual preparatory artillery bombardment. The fighting in this sector has been some of the bitterest of the Korean campaign. Key points change hands repeatedly, and gains are measured in yards. The tanks move up to new positions nearer the ridge and continue to blast away at the communist emplacements. The enemy returns the fire and scores a near miss on one of our tanks. A South Korean 57mm battery adds its firepower to the assault as the bombardment proceeds to soften up the Reds for the infantry attack. A South Korean officer calls for mortar fire, and the mortars lend their explosive voice to the artillery pounding. Paced by this support, the column brings the full force of its firepower to bear on the Red-dominated hill. Throughout Korea during the first week of February, observers are noticing more and more the high morale evidenced by the UN soldiers. With assured faith in their leaders and confidence in their own ability as a fighting team, the troops of 14 nations forge ahead in the push northward toward the Han River and Seoul. On the 10th of February, troops of the 25th Division reached the outskirts of Seoul. The Han River Bridge figures once more in the Korean fighting, and a familiar sign still stands. 3 badly frightened Chinese prisoners are brought in for questioning. Expecting execution, they face only interrogation and removal to PW compounds. Attempting to cross the Han, a patrol is halted temporarily by intense fire from the communists occupying Seoul. Later, another patrol managed to enter the city, but withdrew after some limited probing. As the action continues with opposing forces dueling from opposite sides of the Han, other UN task forces are sweeping north and west to occupy Incheon and Kimpo. At the week's close, 4 Allied divisions are at the Han, and Seoul is nearly surrounded. As the United Nations offensive goes into its 3rd week, the communist defense becomes more stubborn and fanatical. Enemy troops give ground slowly along most of the front in the face of spirited Allied attacks. Here in the central sector north of Incheon, 24th Division troops recapture Hill 704, which was taken from them by a Red assault on the previous night. A prisoner points out nearby Chinese positions. The big guns of the U.S. tanks are prepared for action, and having pinpointed enemy concentrations on the adjacent hills, bring their massed firepower to bear on the stubbornly resisting Reds entrenched on the slopes. In constant communication with the fire control center, the tanks continue their heavy bombardment. The enemy is blasted relentlessly in preparation for the following infantry attack. Above Wonju, a flying boxcar delivers ammunition and supplies to the 10th Corps, which is preparing a new assault against increasing Red pressure in the central mountain sector. Supply by airdrop, once an emergency measure, has become routine in Korea. With the spring thaws due soon, and with them the almost impassable Korean mud, these techniques of airborne logistical support will permit continued supply operations. North of Incheon, 24th Division Artillery prepares to open fire on Hill 584, where UN forces are attempting to dislodge a stubborn enemy force. These hill positions anchor the right flank of the Red Central Sector offensive. By commanding the heights, UN troops hope to flank and cave in the communist advance. 4.2 heavy mortars join in the barrage. The communists held fast in these hills during most of the Allied limited offensive of the last 3 weeks. Now, with the launching of the Reds' counteroffensive down the central mountains, the communists cling tenaciously to this strong hill salient, which guards the right flank of their drive toward Wonju. Observers watch strikes on the enemy hill positions. Under cover of the barrage, the men push up the steep terrain towards the objective. Protected by the thick and tangled underbrush, the Reds laid down a volume of small arms fire that causes the troops to slow down in their advance. During the last 10 days, key points in this hill area have repeatedly changed hands, with Allied gains being held down to a few thousand yards. The troops keep watch for snipers, plotting the course to be followed when the assault is resumed. Meanwhile, machine gun positions are set up as they consolidate their gains against a possible Red counter-thrust. The communist lines are strong, and artillery fire is called for to loosen enemy supporting areas. In spite of the initial bombardment, the Reds hold firm in their emplaced positions, dominating the heights. The howitzer shells smash lethal punches into the face of the enemy. The steep grade slows the advance. Attacking in battalion strength, the troops move up as fast as possible to avoid Red sniper fire. Red forces have relied heavily on surprise night attacks, attempting to regain positions taken from them during the day by UN units. The communist tactics of infiltration and sudden mass charges fit well with the dense foliage. Supporting fire is supplied by heavy machine guns. The attack gets underway. The new assault carries forward to one section of the hill's crest where UN troops are able to bring fire directly on the main enemy positions in close, rugged fighting. The attack is turned back. However, at week's end, an all-out drive crushes these positions, collapsing the right flank of the Reds' offensive. By the 18th of February, UN forces seize the initiative again as Operation Killer forges northward in the wake of the ill-fated Red breakthrough attempt.
During the period of 20 February to 20 March, the United Nations Operation Killer continues in the face of weakening enemy resistance and the annual torrential rains. In the western sector, UN forces have reached the Han River, while in the central sector, they have driven north of Wonju to the vicinity of Chipyong. On 12 March, Allied troops slam across the Han 15 miles east of Seoul. The attack cuts Red supply and communication lines to the city, and on 13 March, the Communists abandoned Seoul without firing a shot. With our recapture of the capital city, enemy forces start a general withdrawal on all fronts, offering only token resistance with rear guard elements. UN units in the central sector push beyond Huncheon and threaten the important Red supply base of Chunshan. By 20 March, UN forces are closely massed across Korea in a general line 15 or 20 miles from the 38th parallel, and continue their advance along all fronts. During the first week of Operation Killer, constant rains and the annual spring thaws produce quagmire conditions which do more to impede advancing UN columns than spotty Red resistance. 1st Cavalry Division elements grind slowly northward in the central sector above Wonju on the heels of Communist rear guard units. The purpose of Operation Killer is identical with that of the UN's limited offensive of the preceding month. General Ridgway again emphasizes that enemy casualties are his main objective. C-119s of the Combat Cargo Command deliver artillery ammo to the 1st Cavalry in the central mountain sector, where the only troublesome Red resistance is encountered. The load is ejected in a compact cluster, resulting in minimum spread on the drop zone. With road traffic mired, airlift operations again pay off to the advantage of our forces. Nose fuses are screwed into place at an artillery forward position in the Korean hills. Powder increments are unpacked, ready for immediate use. The chain of supply ends as armored artillery batteries fire outgoing rounds at enemy held points in the wooded hills. Here, white phosphorus shells pound communist positions. Air bursts hurl metal fragments into the enemy emplacements. Since the Korean War began, the UN forces' close and plentiful artillery support has helped greatly to neutralize the large numerical superiority of the Reds. And here, artillery again softens communist defenses, clearing the way for the renewed Allied offensive. United Nations air power continues its around-the-clock pounding of men and materiel. Merciless attrition and interdiction sorties prevent the communists from consolidating in any large buildup of forces. During the period 5 to 12 March, the United Nations attrition offensive moves steadily ahead in the Yangpyeong area north of the Han River. Across muddy and snow-streaked fields, troops of the 24th Division carry the battle to the enemy, with a heavy strike at strong communist forces entrenched on the western foothills of Korea's central mountains. Heavy armor of the United Nations moves up in close support of the 24th Division riflemen. The 8th Army's numerically superior armor enables them to supply Allied foot soldiers with maximum support. These tanks, playing on the superstitious nature of the enemy, are painted with the markings of the tiger. Intensified armor-supported attacks of this kind are rolling back the Red aggressors along most of the front and are preventing them from initiating any offensive action of their own. Assault troops advance to the objective through dense underbrush, where the Reds still hold out despite the heavy artillery pounding. The attack moves to the crest of the hill, and grenades are used to blast the remaining defenders from their deep holes and caves, which enable them to weather the pre-attack pounding. As our advance forces secure the heights, reserve units entrench themselves in the valley to consolidate the gains. 3 midweek Chinese counterattacks are turned back by the 24th Division here in the area of the Pukan River as the Reds attempt to outflank the 25th Division salient to the west. Other groups take time out for food and rest before resuming the attack against Red strongpoints established on the adjacent hills. In preparation for the present assault, a forward mortar position is excavated in the frozen ground halfway up the hill. The mortar is emplaced in this advanced location where it will be able to fire upon the enemy-held high ground. The sights are aligned and the 60mm begins its explosive attack. A recoilless rifle is brought into action against the stubborn resistance. A machine gun lends its firepower as the advance gets fully underway. A Chinese prisoner is brought in for questioning after the position is taken in a hard but surprisingly short fight. The PW is uncertain of what treatment to expect, and anticipating the worst, he warily eyes his captors as they execute only a thorough search. On 7 March, assault troops of the U.S. 25th Infantry Division advanced to the Han River 15 miles east of Seoul. Elements of the 27th Regiment take time out for food before resuming the advance. Because of its frequent use in emergency action, this regiment has come to be known as the Fire Brigade. On the south bank of the Han, an engineer bulldozer clears an approach for a floating bridge to be erected across the river. This bridge will accommodate the medium tanks and other heavy vehicles. The 25th Division crossing begins early. The craft were brought up from the rear during the long period of waiting since the United Nations troops first reached the Han early last month. Elements of this crossing encounter little or no enemy resistance. Men of a heavy mortar squad prepare breakfast, but remain constantly on the alert. The call comes. The command to fire is given, and the crew swings into action. A tank adds its lethal punch. UN troops examine a deserted Chinese gun emplacement in the path of the advance. A causeway for a footbridge across the Han is constructed. Ducks are brought up to accommodate a greater number of troops in the crossing. Later, they do double duty by bringing back Chinese prisoners. A short 2 hours after the initial crossing, U.S. engineers are well along in their construction of a footbridge. This bridge will provide additional means of crossing for larger groups of infantrymen. Two engineers have taken unexpected plunges into the cold water of the river, and men in an assault boat go to their rescue. The accident doesn't seem to dampen the spirits of either man, and soon the footbridge is completed and in operation. By late afternoon, the entire 25th Division is across the river, and the day's objective is secured. The bridgehead is continually expanded, and by week's end, patrols are engaged in probing action 7.5 miles north of the Han. By mid-March, the renewed United Nations offensive is rolling steadily forward, nearing the 38th parallel. Members of a 7th Division reconnaissance patrol strike northward through land from which the communist forces have been withdrawing rapidly, but in good order. The tank-reinforced patrol finds little opposition from the retreating Reds. Communist resistance, which had previously been stubborn at many key points, now seems to have collapsed in most areas. However, their withdrawal route is studded with anti-tank mines and booby traps. Mine detectors sweep the narrow roads. Engineers repair a road dynamited by the retreating Reds. The collapse of communist resistance below the parallel seems to indicate that the Reds hope to prepare their spring offensive in North Korea, unmolested by UN ground attacks. The blasted area is quickly restored, and the patrol continues toward the boundary line. Enemy casualties are low as the communists, pulling back mostly at night, carry out their retreat according to careful plan. In its dash toward the parallel, the patrol passes through many gutted villages, visual testimony of the toll of war. One tank wallows in a stream, disabled by an enemy mine cleverly placed at the stream ford. Although time is precious, an attempt is made to tow the disabled tank from the water. Operating on a strict schedule, the patrol is attempting to reach the 38th parallel and return during the daylight hours. The tank bogs down in midstream and has to be abandoned. Loose equipment and removable armament are quickly stripped from the derelict tank. Near the parallel, Red rear guard positions are raked with 50 caliber fire. A few miles short of their objective, the patrol finds a demolished bridge blocking further advance and heads back to report on enemy activity in Congo.
UN ground forces on all fronts are pushing slowly and methodically northward toward the 38th parallel. They meet only light resistance as the Chinese communists fall back. On 21 March, Chuncheon falls without a fight. In an attempt to speed up the offensive and trap the large enemy force guarding the approaches to Pyongyang, the 187th Regimental Combat Team parachutes behind enemy lines in the Munsan area
just 12 miles below the parallel. At the same time, other UN forces drive northward along a 15-mile front above Seoul to meet them. However, the main body of the communist troops escaped the trap. By 31 March, South Korean forces in the east have already crossed the parallel and are moving inland from Yongyang. In the west, a U.S. tank column crosses the 38th parallel north of Seoul. Meanwhile, UN naval forces patrol the East Korean waters, harassing enemy transport and troop movements along the coast, and bombarding key communist traffic hubs. Allied ground troops continue their cautious advance into enemy territory, and on 18 April, after days of bloody fighting, UN troops in the central sector capture the strategic Hwachon Dam and enter the town of Hwachon. As of 20 April, the Chinese communists are continuing to fall back all along the front with heavy casualties. But their resistance becomes stronger as UN troops approach the huge enemy concentrations that have been massed below Wonsan for the long-expected counteroffensive. During this 30-day period, the greatest aerial battle of the Korean War took place with over 225 bombers and fighters involved. 8 enemy jets are destroyed, no friendly fighters are lost. On this map of Korea, a crudely improvised tomahawk marks the jump area for a parachute operation beyond our front lines. The airborne mission is named Operation Tomahawk. Objective, to seize an area deep in enemy territory on the Imjin River near Munsan and hold on until ground forces move up to consolidate the position. Equipment of the parachutist gets a pre-loading inspection. Any loose dangling gear may injure the jumper or snap off and get lost when the chute opens. 3,300 parachutists of the 187th Regimental Combat Team will participate in the operation. Into the C-119 flying boxcars, heavy equipment is loaded. 4.2-inch mortars, 105mm howitzers, and jeeps are prepared for the drop to support the parachute infantrymen. Air Force crew members get last-minute briefings. Pilots carefully recheck jump areas on maps, get latest weather report, and then prepare to take off. Troop carrier planes rendezvous over Daegu and fly northward. Fighters and bombers have preceded these planes to soften up enemy resistance. Here's the jump area, 10 miles south of the parallel. At 0900 on Good Friday, 23 March, Brigadier General Frank S. Bowen's 187th Airborne RCT hits the silk over the rice paddies and rolling terrain of the jump area. The parachutists leave the troop carriers in sticks of 42 men from each plane at an altitude of 800 feet. As soon as all parachute personnel have jumped, the flying boxcars start delivering the heavy equipment. In this plane, jeeps and trailers are being dropped. A small parachute is released to aid in pulling the heavy cargo from the plane. More equipment and supplies are dropped as the parachutists quickly assemble and organize on the ground. The North Korean First Corps, believed to be in this area, had vanished. No serious opposition was encountered. Operation Tomahawk gains 20 miles in one day. Just before nightfall, the first tanks of the 24th Infantry Division link up with the parachutists. Tank drivers poke their heads up through their ports to have a look around. The task force reorganizes and moves out. While foot troops move up, tactical air makes a coordinated strike against the enemy's hastily constructed fortified positions in the hills. Jets deliver one of the most feared of our weapons, napalm bombs. These jellied gasoline bombs have proved highly successful in flushing the enemy from prepared positions. With air and artillery preparation completed, riflemen take up the assault and overrun the enemy's defensive lines before the communists can recover from the shock of the bombardment. This assault moves the United Nations forces one step closer to the communist-violated border of the Republic of Korea. The enemy increases his defensive fires, resisting stubbornly, sometimes fanatically, as the area of the 38th parallel becomes a battleground for the 4th time since the war started last June. A rifle platoon passes through an area burned out by napalm bombs. The only enemy found in this area was charred. An automatic rifleman spots a target of opportunity and opens fire, and a 3.5-inch bazooka team is engaged in neutralizing defensive positions. And, as always, there is just one more hill to take before the assault is completed. After the objective is overrun and the units reorganize, the men fight off the chill of the mountain climate. The serpentine route of the Imjin River creates a land pocket with a natural water barrier on 3 sides near the 38th parallel. Communist elements withdrew across this river after abandoning Seoul without a fight. Here on the south bank of the river, units of the 1st ROK Division prepare to cross the Imjin. South Korean troops assemble for the Imjin crossing, while their combat engineers bring up the assault boats. Brigadier General Paik Sun-yup, commanding general of the 1st ROK Division, supervises the operation which was planned by his staff officers. Areas suspected of containing hostile forces are plotted by artillerymen. The South Koreans request a fire mission from U.S. forces to support the river crossing. The mission is coordinated and artillery pieces fire as requested. Immediately following the softening up artillery fire in the area north of the Imjin, the ROK troops load into assault boats and paddle across the river as enemy small arms fire harasses the operation. Enemy forces on the north bank, scouted earlier by a patrol, are estimated to be in company strength. This crossing is being made near the site where the main Allied supply road spanned the Imjin last year when United Nations forces were fighting in the Pyongyang area to the north. United Nations liaison officers observe the activities as the river crossing is executed. The Imjin is crossed successfully against ineffective resistance from North Koreans and elements of the Chinese 3rd Field Army. In the shadow of Paris's famed Arc de Triomphe, General of the Army Dwight D. Eisenhower takes command of Supreme Headquarters, Allied Powers, Europe, at his temporary headquarters in the Hotel Astoria. SHAPE is a functional unit of NATO, the North Atlantic Treaty Organization.
For many months, the nations of NATO have been engaged in erecting for themselves a wall of security against any possible aggression. They have no aggressive intent or purpose of their own. They intend only to see to it that they may live peaceably and secure behind the arrangements that they collectively make. Today, another significant step was taken in this process of ensuring our collective security. This headquarters, formally and officially, assumed operational control and command of all forces allocated by our several countries to the defense of Europe.
General Eisenhower executes the first order issued by SHAPE. By signing this historic document, the General assumes formal command of all Allied land, sea, and air organizations assigned to him by NATO. On a 60-acre plot of Marley Forest, which has been cleared in this area, construction of a permanent headquarters for SHAPE is begun. This location, 20 miles west of Paris, was once a secluded retreat for Louis XIV, who built an ornate palace here. In contrast to the King's Palace, the new SHAPE buildings will be modest, constructed of prefabricated materials to house 600 military and civilian headquarters personnel. Foundations are poured as top priority is given to the project. The task of forging a North Atlantic military force for the defense of Western Europe eventually will be centrally located here. This is the beginning of a tank infantry team assault deep into enemy-held territory. Here in an undisclosed area north of Seoul, an attack order is issued for a tank infantry patrol. After the order is given, extra HE grenades are distributed. During the early dawn of the following morning, armor rendezvous with riflemen. Men of the 3rd Division mount tanks to ride during the initial phase of the patrol's advance. Mission of the tank infantry team: cross Imjin River, probe communist defenses beyond the 38th parallel, and report back on his dispositions and equipment. Test his strength, but do not become decisively committed. Withdraw when information is secured. This is a reconnaissance in force. All roads leading into enemy territory are heavily mined. Tanks take to the Imjin River bed, shallow here where it crosses a 38th parallel, to avoid red mines. Abandoned communist trucks are found in the river. On the far side of the Imjin, the infantrymen dismount onto North Korean soil and prepare to move out. The patrol moves forward over the innumerable hills into which the enemy forces are dug in. Red fields of fire are not yet brought to bear on the assaulting troops. An enemy position is engaged. Extra grenades issued the night before now come in handy as the riflemen close with a defensive outpost. After the outpost defenses are overrun, the tank infantry team reorganizes and continues the advance. Incoming small arms fire and mortar rounds are beginning to slow down the speed of the patrol's forward movement. The troops are cautious not to become decisively engaged. Red resistance increases as the patrol fights into a small village located on the Kaigan Mainline Railroad, which runs between Seoul and Pyongyang. Making sure their flanks are protected, the tank infantry team punches into the village and destroys communist installations. By late afternoon, this reconnaissance in force completes its mission and returns safely to its base. After receiving an order to clear an area near the 38th parallel of communist snipers and to search roads for landmines, a detail of a reconnaissance company prepares for its mission. Weapons are loaded and a final check of equipment is made. The tank convoy gets underway. This roadway has already been cleared of mines. The men keep alert for enemy snipers. All bridges over streams and rivers have been destroyed by the withdrawing communist forces. Tanks ford streams at the shallowest points. Foot troops precede the tanks, searching for landmines. A culvert bridge blasted by retreating Reds halts the advance momentarily, but not for long. Engineer troops measure the distance to estimate bridging materials required to span the gully. In no mood to wait, a tank bypasses the wrecked bridge and presses out a detour. The tonnage of the tank smashes a new road that leads through a small village on the far side. This Jeep, in four-wheel drive and shifted in low, bogs down despite a persistent attempt to move through the giant rocks. The much heavier tank returns to smooth out the steep approaches and the rocky terrain. Now the Jeep moves over the detour and out the other side over the tank-made path. Teamwork pays off. Remember the sign on the American roads that said, "Beware soft shoulder"? Well, here's what it can mean in Korea. Another tank moves up to the disabled one, but can be of no assistance. Crew members sweat it out while their tank balances precariously. Chinese surrender leaflets are found in the vicinity of the disabled tank, and tankers read the propaganda through curious but distrusting eyes. The usual reaction to these propaganda leaflets is the traditional but appropriate nuts. After radioing for a tank retriever, the recon detail moves on to accomplish its mission. During the period 20 April to 20 May, the Communists launched two phases of their expected spring offensive. On 23 April, the Reds jump off on their first phase, hitting strongest above Seoul. UN troops are forced to withdraw south as British and Belgian contingents hold off the Communists in a spectacular rearguard engagement. A secondary action of this phase hits in the Hwachon Reservoir area. By 30 April, UN forces cease their withdrawal and set up the Lincoln Defense Line a few miles north of Seoul. In the central sector, UN troops withdraw south of the Pukhan River, and in the east, ROK forces pull back to Yangyang. From 1 May to 16 May, there is only minor enemy activity as the Communists build up for the second phase, and UN forces recover some ground north of Seoul. UN air forces strike at targets of opportunity. The second phase begins on 17 May with the heaviest attack in the central sector southwest of Inji and east of Chonchon. Heavy casualties are inflicted on the Reds in this area. On 20 May, the UN forces shorten their line north of Seoul, strengthen positions in the central sector, and move to plug a gap caused by the collapse of two ROK divisions. In the Imjin River area, soldiers of two combat teams quickly break camp. These combat teams are composed of British, Belgian, Filipino, and American troops. What may be the last meal for a long time is grabbed as a report is received of a large enemy force which has crossed the nearby Imjin. These UN troops start their withdrawal according to plan. Mortars blast at the approaching Reds who threaten to cut off the combat teams. The withdrawal starts south, down the main highway that passes through Uijeonbu to Seoul. Hit by an enemy shell, this UN truck tractor burns. Due to machine gun and mortar fire from infiltrated enemy troops, the convoy halts. Men take cover and wait until the way has been cleared. The long convoy moves southward again with its cargo of men and equipment. The communist offensive was expected, and nothing of use is left behind. En route, battalion commanders discuss the situation. In Uijeonbu, a sign aptly states the result of war's devastation on the town. Tanks and trucks race through the battered town to pick up units of the combat team, which are redeployed in new defense line south of Uijeonbu. Later, a battalion of infantry plods wearily through the rice paddies. After fighting off the Chinese all through the night, they slog through the pelting rain to new defensive positions. Their fatigue is apparent in every step. A little more water doesn't seem to matter much as they wade a swollen stream. Full advantage is taken of the chance for a short rest before fighting off the Reds again. Rain-soaked troops hold rearguard positions covering the withdrawal. This is the third major Red offensive of the conflict. The first was the initial North Korean aggression last June, and the second, the full-scale intervention of the Chinese Communists on 26 November. Our 155's blast evacuated Uijeonbu. Withdrawal continues as UN firepower takes a terrible toll of Chinese. Further south, nearing Seoul, the last UN vehicles cross a bridge south of Yapyong. Men of an engineer battalion pour gasoline on the bridge, which has also been mined with TNT. The bridge is destroyed. Communist human sea tactics against our superior firepower is costing them dearly for each mile they advance. At the end of the first week of the Communist spring offensive, Allied units withdraw to defensive positions north of Seoul. In the western sector, where Red pressure is heaviest, trucks loaded with troops move rapidly south. UN forces have broken contact with the enemy all along most of the front. As soon as defending forces have taken positions behind the Lincoln Line, final line of defense between Uijeonbu and Seoul, engineers plant an extensive minefield. The anti-tank mines are armed as the field is completed. Anti-personnel mines will also be laid. To augment the minefields, barbed wire entanglements are constructed by the engineers. Working quickly, the wire is strung and stretched taut. A 75mm recoilless rifle covers the valley which the Reds must cross to reach the Lincoln Line. Observers of an ROK division use this high point to advantage and keep close watch on the opposing hills. Artillery is called for to give relief to a UN tank column under enemy fire in the valley. HE shells blast the distant hills, giving support and cover to the withdrawing tanks. The armored patrol is returning to the Lincoln Line after contacting 2 Chinese battalions. A tank nudges a Korean hut aside to clear the field of fire for a roadblock. As Allied forces retire behind the Lincoln Line, tanks are put into use as defensive weapons. heavy firepower of the artillery is ready. Tanks wait in emplaced positions to add their forceful punch. In the heart of Seoul, on the grounds of the Capitol building, 155 howitzers fire a sharp warning at the advancing Chinese. The artillerymen improved their emplacements within view of the Capitol. Although earlier the South Korean government warned the populace to leave, almost 500,000 remained in the city, showing confidence in our ability to hold despite the growing menace of the Red advance. The government was finally forced to order the evacuation. Only then did the people leave. The UN troops remained on the Lincoln Line to write the next chapter in the defense of Seoul. A field hospital in Korea. Full facilities must be available here for the first phase of treatment of the wounded. It's the critical phase. An emergency shipment of blood coming in. Whole blood, the doctor's best friend. Oftentimes the wounded man's only chance for life. Donated in New York or San Francisco or St. Louis, typed, stored, and shipped with the strictest scientific care, it's here, where it's needed. After first aid treatment at an aid station, wounded men are brought to the field hospital. Here they are given only the necessary treatment to put them in shape for speedy evacuation to a base hospital, where every benefit of modern medicine and surgery is available. Almost every wounded man has lost too much blood. He needs replacement quickly to overcome or prevent shock, to make his system responsive to treatment, or capable of withstanding the shock of an operation. If a wounded man can be evacuated to a base hospital in good shape, he's as good as saved. Drop by drop, a young man's precious life is saved for his loved ones, for his country. The gifts of blood must never stop. Troops of the UN forces move along a barbed wire barricade on a ridge near the town of Tokso, part of the line of defense against the communists in this sector. As further determined to the mass assaults of the Chinese, an anti-personnel minefield is planted just beyond the UN-held line. Tripwires are adjusted from the stakes to the mines, which have an effective danger radius of 75 yards. A pressure of 9 pounds against the tripwire will explode one of these lethal traps. Until the field is completely sown, each wire is marked by a lightweight plate. On the road bordering the minefield, tanks and infantrymen of a recon company survey the defense line. The next morning, the road is strewn with the bodies of 24 members of an enemy patrol which tried to infiltrate during the night. One Red soldier still lives. Men of the recon company cautiously move the wounded man onto the road from the gully. The communist is apparently in great pain, but the combat-wise soldiers, used to the tricks of a treacherous enemy, search him for concealed weapons or possible booby traps. In the shelter of one of our tanks, first aid is given to the wounded man. From a vantage point atop a hill, a machine gunner watches the valley below as his assistant adjusts his fire through a BC scope. An observer checks the terrain as a gunner fires at an enemy position in a village ahead. Smoke rises from the battered town. Troops of the United Nations maintain their vigilance and refuse to give up ground to the communist hordes without exacting a heavy toll for every foot of ground. A returning tank brings news that the infiltrating Reds have been routed from the village. Just north of Seoul, Allied planes smash Chinese columns massed for an attack a scant 1,000 yards beyond our main line of defense. Pouring down the historic invasion routes from Munsan and Uijeonbu, the Reds try to break through to Seoul. Officers observe the effectiveness of UN air power back in the skies after days of rain as it plasters enemy concentrations building up for their much-heralded May Day attack on Seoul. The planes smother the target with machine gun fire, rockets, and napalm. The infantry adds its voice. Not even the fanatical communists can stand against this sort of coordinated defense. With the full Allied power shattering their formations, the enemy's planned May Day offensive is stalled before it starts.